fourth grade. Today we're going to work on comparing with adjectives. We have two different forms of an adjective that we use when we compare. We have what's called the comparative and the superlative. All that means is with the comparative, we are comparing two things. Two things. And that means we use an adjective with an ER ending. Like for instance, I can say that this pencil is longer than this marker. Okay, I add ER to long. Say this pencil is longer than this marker. Or this Sharpie is fatter than this other marker that I have. Okay, or I could say that my son is taller than I am. Or the river is longer than the creek, or the creek is shorter than the river. So I compare using ER, okay, when I compare two things. But the superlative form means I compare three things. Three things, and I use EST. EST. So if I go back to my pencil here, I have my pencil, and I have this marker, and I have the red marker. I can say that the pencil is the longest of these three writing instruments, or that the red marker is the shortest, because I'm comparing three. If it's just two, I say the pencil is longer than the yellow marker. But if I have three, I say the pencil is the longest. Okay, we could say that the wedding dress was the prettiest dress she had ever worn. Be prettiest, because I would be comparing it to all of the other dresses. Now some words we cannot add ER to them. We use the word more, and some words we can't add EST, and we use most. And some words that we don't add ER or EST to are words like this: afraid and beautiful and comfortable and difficult and exhausted. These are not all of the words that we don't add ER or EST to. They're just some of them, some examples. So for instance, we could say that watching the movie made me more afraid than reading the book. Or that was the most beautiful flower of all. Or I think my couch is the most comfortable place to sit in my house. Or the math quiz was more difficult than the math test. Or he was the most exhausted he had ever been after running a marathon. So we use most to compare three things, or EST. To compare two things, we use ER or the word more. Now there are some spelling rules we need to talk about when adding ER and EST. Okay, if we have a word like easy that ends in a Y, in order to add ER or EST, I need to change the Y to I and add ER or add EST. Easier, easiest. Change the Y to I. Another example of a word like that would be pretty. You change the Y to I before adding the ER or the EST. Okay? And then we have words like hot and wet. They each end with a single consonant that follows a single short vowel. So for hot and wet, both of those words, I'm going to double the final consonant. So it's going to be hotter with two T's and hottest with two T's. Okay, so we might say that June is hotter than April, and August is usually the hottest month of all. Okay, we have wet and then wetter and wettest. Okay. My daughter got wetter than I did in the rain, but my son was the wettest of all because he was soaking wet. Okay, so that's how we compare with adjectives. Now we have two special words that we don't add ER or EST to. We change the word completely. Okay, and those words are good and bad. Okay, my forms of good and bad when I compare are good, better, and so that's my comparative form is better. Okay, and my superlative form would be best. Okay, and then for bad, let me move good and bad out of this comparative and superlative. Let me put them in the middle. Okay, good and bad. Okay, so better and best, and then worse and worst. Notice there is not a word called worser. Okay, it's worse and worst. So for better, we would compare two things. I almost always think that a book is better than a movie. Okay, and for best, I could say that was the best book that I have ever read, or that ice cream was the best dessert I've ever had. Right, worse, when I compare two things, you could say I got a worse grade on my math test than on my English test. And for worst, you could say that was the worst night's sleep that I have ever had. So best and worst are superlative. 3 or more things being compared. 3 or more. Okay? And better and worse are comparative. 2 things being compared. So you're going to do 2 pages in your English workbook. The first page is page 85. And all you have to do is change the underlined adjective to the form named in parentheses. So this says, who has the blank backpack in the group? And you're going to use the word heavy, but the superlative form. So that means you need to put heaviest. And that's an example of a word that ends in a Y. So you need to change the Y to I before you add EST. So it would be heaviest. Okay. Then on number 2, let's go to number 3 because it asks for a comparative. This trail is steep than that one. Need the comparative, we'd say steeper. So you're going to put steeper for number 3. That's the comparative form, steeper. You just add an ER. Okay, and let's do one more. Let's look at number 5. Today's weather couldn't be blank than yesterday's. And you need the comparative form. Okay, so bad, the comparative form if bad is worse. So you will write worse for number 5 on page 85. So you're going to finish that page, and then you're going to do page 87. You're not doing 86, you're just doing 87. You have to choose the correct letter. Make sure you read the sentences carefully before you choose the adjective.